Hello everyone! Today we're going to be talking about in-text citation, the when and the how. It is my hopes that by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to utilize your newfound understanding of in-text citation effectively and appropriately in your own writing. We're going to be talking about author page citation, the most common form of in-text citation used in MLA. The first thing that I want to talk about is how to cite the author and the page number. One of the ways to do this is to mention the author's name before a quote. In this example, the author's name, Delansky, is mentioned at the beginning of the sentence before the quote, so the only information needed in the citation at the end is the page number. Similar to that, you can mention the author's name before a paraphrase. Again, Delansky's name is mentioned before a paraphrase from the text is taken. So the only information needed in the citation at the end is the page number. A slightly different way to do this is to exclude the author's name from the sentence altogether. In that case, the author's name needs to go in the parentheses at the end before the page number. The next thing that I want to talk about is citing sources with multiple authors. When you're citing a source with two or more authors, it's appropriate to put both authors' last names within the citation. In this example, Green and Levithan, before you put the page number. However, when you're citing a source with three or more authors, it's a little bit different. The only name you need to include is the last name of the first author listed, in this case, Anderson, and then you put comma et al., meaning and everyone else, before your page number. Next, I want to talk about citing multiple sources from one author. When you're citing two or more articles by the same author, instead of putting the author's name within your parentheses, you put the name of the article within quotations. A similar thing is done when you're citing books, except you put the book title within italics in the parentheses. It's important to remember that the names of articles are always in quotations, and the names of books are always in italics. Now I want to talk about some unusual cases of authorship. While these cases are unusual, it's not impossible to come across them. The first thing I want to talk about is citing sources with an unknown author. Now this is the same quote from our Delansky article. So we do know the name of the author for this article, but if we didn't, we would put the name of the article within quotations before our page number. Now, when you're citing two or more authors with the same last name, as with Gertrude Stein and Garth Stein, you would put the first initial of the author's first name and then their last name before you put the page number. However, in this case, both Gertrude Stein and Garth Stein have the first initial G, so you would put the author's full name to differentiate between the two authors. The next thing I want to talk about is citing indirect sources. It's important to remember that when you're doing a citation, it's always better to include the primary source if you can. However, some primary sources are going to be really difficult to get your hands on. In that case, you can take a quote of a quote from an article. In this example, Delansky had quoted Clement of Alexandria. In order to do an in-text citation for this sort of indirect source, you would put QTD, meaning quoted, in Delansky on page 270. With all of that in mind, it's important to remember that everything included within your in-text citations should directly relate to your works cited page. That's all for today. I hope you have a better understanding of in-text citations now, and thank you for watching.